He composes music for film and television. His band, The Spiritual Machines, are about to release their new album, and he's got a lot of great advice on how to stay creative and inspired while having fun making music. Please welcome Evan Frankfort to the Music Production Podcast. This episode of the Music Production Podcast is brought to you by Baby Audio, makers of creative instruments and effect plugins. Baby Audio is all about inspiring tools that add color to your mix. Their newest plugin is Humanoid, a robotic hard tuner and radical voice manipulator. It takes extreme vocal tuning to new futuristic levels. I'm using it as a vocoder on steroids and a vocal harmony generator. Humanoid is currently 40% off the normal price, and if you use the special Music Production Podcast code MPP15, you'll save an additional 15% off Humanoid and any other purchase at Baby Audio. Go to babyaud.io to learn more and use the code MPP15. That's babyaud.io and use the code MPP15 to save an additional 15%. Evan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. You've done so much work in composing music for film and television. Your band, The Spiritual Machines, have a new record coming out. And before we hit record, we got to talking to get to know each other, and it became really apparent to me that you have a lot of fun doing this and you enjoy the process of making music.
Yeah, I feel like, you can always rely on process. You can always do the nuts and bolts of things, and that's going to generate something. But, we're looking for lightning in a bottle. We're looking to be surprised and inspired, and I think those moments, they can drop into your lap, but many of them are, just earned, hard fought. And I mean, it is fun, but sometimes you'll go through 10 hours of searching and then, at that moment, something arrives. It'll be, sometimes weeks or months. And when it does arrive, you rethink everything and you say, okay, I have all of this. Let's go back and, sort of make this new idea, the centerpiece idea, and start over. So, yeah, where was I? Just that, the idea of not knowing when lightning is going to strike. You just keep trying things, you keep, going into uncharted waters, and you learn to swim at every moment, So otherwise, you're retreading, you're rehashing something. And I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to come from the days where there were no presets. And I was staunch against them. I didn't take notes, and I didn't want to recreate any processes. I just wanted to listen my way through every moment and say, no, let's move the microphone an inch. Let's, switch pre's or whatever. And I think, it was a good way to learn because everything was unfolding differently every time. The element of chaos was in play. And there were, amazing producers and engineers that I worked with that they did take copious notes, and they could almost recreate anything they'd ever done. And in the beginning, I sort of viewed it as, just not exciting. But in the end, I realized the value of it. If you have to recall a mix, or if somebody says, hey, I love, what you did for this record or this thing, whatever, you could use that as a jumping off point. And so when presets kind of came into being, it was something I fought for a while, but then, when I did embrace them, I realized, okay, I've been swimming upstream my whole life, fighting the tide. We can just float and have the stream carry us. And things happened a lot quicker. They happened with less frustration. And frankly, they were better, because if you can jump off from where you left off and build on it every time, then, you just keep refining and improving. And I think that's, obviously the goal. But I think that so how you can't zoom in and out at the same time, right? Like if you're working on something and the creative juices are flowing, you don't judge. You don't stand back and say, this should go like this and that. You don't lead yourself. You just let the process lead you. And then you can zoom out and see, where you are and how it affects the big picture. But it's the same way with that chaos element. If you allow chaos to guide you and you look at it as your friend, then you're going to get to a place you don't recognize. And that's really the only place I want to be. If I say I've been here before, then I move on.
So it's well put. You can't zoom in and out at the same time. That's something I think causes me to get stuck, causes me to, I'm in this creative mode, I'm doing this, having fun, maybe working on something really intricate, and then you switch that perspective. It's hard to do that. You lose that moment.
You can't do it until you're out of gas, because you really just think of it two ways, right? Like you're generating ideas or you're assembling and judging and, producing really. And you can't be the producer and the generator at once. So how quickly you can switch, apertures on it is really kind of what defines the speed of your process. Some people, they'll go through weeks of being creative and then, they'll take a break so that they can listen to some music and refresh and change the angle. And then they'll have clarity on what they did. Now I can, be an impartial observer and judge this thing. Because, you get in love with your ideas and you're like, no one's going to touch this.
Right. This is your special trick.
Yeah. So for me, I try to get divorced from my ideas instantly. You fall in love, you get married, it's a love affair. And then I let go. I just say, okay, you're not mine. This is just a thing. And then it gets a lot easier to say, I have 7 competing ideas here. That's the one.
Right.
Sorry, other 6. I know we were in love and we had a great thing while it lasted, but you got to go.
Well, it's like you're that guitar player in the band that wants to turn up to 11, and you're also the drummer, and you're also the keyboard player, and you're also, so everyone of these things inside of you, these kind of multiple personalities you have when you're making music like that, they are all trying to turn it up to 11, and you can't do it that way.
Right. It has to be, everything matters when you're in the trench, and then nothing matters when you're out of it. Everything is precious when you're generating ideas because, if you didn't feel like what you were doing was important, you wouldn't do it. You need to feel like this is going to be the greatest thing that I ever did. This is what I was born to do. This moment is what everything I did before in my life prepared me for. And Can you believe it's happening? And here we are. It's me and me, or me and you, or, the band, or whatever it is. You get to have that moment in its full glory, and then you rob yourself of it. Then you say, okay, it's out in the universe. It's not mine. It never was yours, but we allow ourselves to, be under the illusion that it's yours. We're pulling ideas out of the ether and we're just hoping that something sticks. And when it does, we want, to feel the glory of that. But I think the glory is really what gets you into trouble because you can no longer be impartial once you say, I'm going to keep this no matter what. Then
you have to sort of respect it, respect the magic of it, but not get enamored by it and be able to let go of it.
Yeah, you just have to see it as a widget at some point. Like this is a thing that's a part of another thing. And sometimes that thing isn't useful and sometimes, it actually is the problem. So
it is. And it's really important when you're in situations where you're collaborating, you're playing with band members. Like you said, everything's precious. And something I tell myself a lot is nothing's precious. This little guitar part I have it's just a guitar part. It's not more important than my relationship with the rest of the band where I'm going to
Yes.
fight to the death and ruin it. And then I can have my guitar part, but I have no one to play it with.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it took me a long time to lose my ego. And I think the thing that did it was, realizing that we're all in service to the same thing, which is the idea,
Right.
And the idea isn't, what you're playing, it's what you're trying to make collectively. And so, when you have an idea, I need to objectively say, holy hell, that's the best idea that anyone in the room has had. That's where we're going right now. And I think that, you do have enough experience at some point to say, I trust that I'm going to find my way through every situation. I know that I've been in enough places where I didn't think I could get a roadmap home, and I just built roads until I got home. And so you do start trusting yourself, and then you're doing the exact opposite where you're saying, I don't have to trust myself. All I have to trust is what I hear, and, you kind of disappear at that point. So you do all this work on yourself, and then you become, not even a musician anymore, not even a creator anymore. You're really just a witness, who's leaning things into the right direction whenever you're able to. But yeah, you have to respect that everyone's a creator and everybody is talented and everybody has great ideas. It's a weird thing, right? Because you build credibility in the process, right? Like if a drummer says, something stupid like, hey, I don't like how you're playing this because it feels too basic or whatever. Like, let's make it a measure of 13 and a measure of 7 and a measure of 9. And now it'll be interesting for you, maybe.
Right.
So unfortunately, now you look at him as like, watch out for that guy. Like every time he opens his mouth, it's going to be, derailing the train. And so you have to have this trust, right? And people will, sort of fill that well and enable you to trust them. But it's also on you to say, look, the last 4 ideas you came up with weren't the one, but I know that you're talented and you're here for a reason. And so I'm going to stay wide open for when that right idea comes along. And I'm always going to consider it with the same, level of possible, genius that everybody else is getting,
Right.
So it's hard, man. It's a lot of psychology. And it's mostly on you against you,
At this point, I think it'd be kind of fun to hear about some of your experience and some of the work you do, because, and this is maybe especially for some of the students I have. I just finished a semester. I teach a sampling class at Berkeley online.
It's awesome.
And it is awesome. It's a lot of fun, and people of all different levels come in, and it's so much sound design and creativity and experiment. But I always tell people, like, nobody ever says it's easy. Even people that have been doing it forever, even people that have tons of accolades and awards and experience. And it's something I've learned on the podcast is no one ever says it's easy. And you are a person that's very prolific, does a lot of different kinds of work. And you just said the same thing. It's hard. It's a lot of psychological stuff. So maybe like almost in a way to sort of back up what I'm telling people, if you don't mind.
I say that almost as, my routine when I'm working on a record and with others. And, we get to a point where we're out of gas. And I just say, look, music is hard. It just is. It doesn't have to be, but if you're going to feel like you got someplace that is yours, and I use that kind of loosely because, like I said, we're borrowing ideas from the ether and each other. And it's this, circle of energy that, we're just inhabiting and trying to create from. And so sometimes the simplest idea wins and it's great and there it is. But, sometimes you got to go around the world to get across the street. And I've done records where I've left people in tears, where they just said, I don't recognize this. And, this isn't what I expected it to be. And I don't understand what just happened. And I spent, months and months of my life and I have this thing now and I don't get it. And then they'll call me a year later and say, yeah, it took me a long time to assimilate it. And I had to have a lot of my friends that I trust tell me this is, the best thing I ever did before I, could come to that place where I'm grateful that we had this painful process. Because I'll steamroll, while you're like over on the couch crying, I'm just plugging away over here. Like, I can't hear that. Like, all I can hear is what's coming out of the speakers. And I know that's going to guide me to the end of the process. And so I'll tune out, the human noise and tune in what matters to me at all costs. Like I said, we're here in service of the music. And so if I can't get there, then I need you to go on without me. And I would expect you would want me to do the same. And having been through it enough times, you get to that point where it's like you're the Malcolm X of recording, by any means necessary. We're doing this, whether anyone wants to do it or not. But yeah, man, it's definitely one of those things where it can, be a million different approaches, and any one of those can be the gold. I mean, you might have almost all of them be the gold. Now you have tough decisions to make. Like, oh, these are all great ideas.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. I mean, we see it in our tools, all the crazy things we can use that are all excellent, and just the ideas we take. Sometimes you have lots of good choices, and it's really tough. It's nice when you get the one thing it's obvious. Like, oh, that's the way. That's the answer. Play that. Cool.
I don't want to hear any more ideas. Like, I just love this one.
We don't need it. We don't need to dig any deeper.
Right. And so that's, hopefully what you get. But, that's definitely the curse of being surrounded by talent, making those tough decisions. But I mean, sound design, that's kind of the core for me too. I feel like I can't even write music until I hear a sound that tells me what to write. I mean, I did a lot of sound design for movies and trailers and TV shows, and it became, one of the primary tools that I wrote music with. I mean, everything inspires something else, right? So you hear something in a drone, something in a whoosh, something in a rise, something in a hit, and it makes you feel what comes next, right? You're setting things up, you're leading yourself to ideas, and when you start turning knobs on a synth, it suggests things, it suggests parts and movements and melodies and everything else. And so I was just listening to Vangelis's Blade Runner score, and I feel like that's just a perfect example of that. Like, he has his synth arsenal, he has this aesthetic of how music comes out of him, and you get it when you hear that score. But most of it feels very timeless to me. There are a couple things where, like, oh yeah, he used sax for the sexy cue, You're like, okay, that definitely dated itself. But, if we didn't have all of the, silly memes to attach to it, it probably would sound fresh and, new to us. And, but yeah, like, those sounds dictate the writing. Mark Snow, X-Files, like, that was written, a lot of it in real time, where he'd just watch picture and play and turn knobs, and, like, what a fun process, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one process, but, like, it can generate. It can be the final, and it can be a component.
That's pretty cool. Just as it goes along, fill it in.
Yeah. You got an hour-long show, or 42 minutes or whatever. Let's see if we can score this thing in 42 minutes. Hit record.
Yeah. I bet that's not what you do on the first day of the job, but once you've been at it for a while. And I guess like with a show like that too, there's a certain sound palette that lends itself. And that's kind of the character of the show, leading you with this mysterious thing. So yeah, a lot of, I'm picturing
synthy, ambient washes.
Vera MIDI kind of sometimes. And
I mean, you always have to ask yourself, what's going to do the work here, right? So I have a great lyric, that's going to do the work. I have a great vocal performance, that's going to do the work. I have a great sound, it's a signature sonic, earworm, and like everybody get out of its way. Like that's the thing, right? So this is one of the things that guides us is looking for whatever's going to do the heavy lifting. And once you determine what that is, your mission becomes pretty clear. But sometimes it's just the sound. Sometimes you just have this thing that you love so much that you wouldn't want to do anything else. It would just sort of get in the way and ruin it for you. Everywhere around the world, there's a drum. Every region, every area has like their specific drum. And some of them, you don't care about. Some of them, when you hear it, you go, yeah, okay. But others, it resonates something, whether it's a chakra or your soul or whatever it is. It just touches you in a way where you just go, dude, I have to hear that drum all day, every day. And, for me, it was pulling sounds out of records where like, I need to hear that snare. That kick is just the perfect thing, or whatever it was. Like, there's something that triggers you, right? Like psychoacoustically. And like, you hear a baby cry and you got to go deal with that. Like, or the MGM lion roar in the theater, where it roars, and like, that story, right? Where the first time 100 years ago when they played it in the theater, people saw the lion on the screen. They're like, oh, it's a lion. And then they heard the roar and they ran out of the theater because they thought there was a lion in the theater. They're like, no, this isn't a movie. This is real. And
that's
so,
wild.
Yeah, like it just triggers us. There's something in everything that triggers us. And to know how it triggers you is to be powerful and to use it as a tool and to say, all right, I can make people cry with these two notes against this movement, right? Or this sound has emotion in it, or whatever it is. Like, we're seeking that thing that we can sort of utilize as an emotional, call and response tool, right? So, sound design is where it's at. Like, if you're hearing the part and you're like, I love this part, how does it make me feel? Well, that's not the feeling I'm going for. Then you have to examine why. Is it in how I'm playing it, or is it in the tone? Should it be another instrument? Like you ask all the questions then.
Right. Yeah. And if I'm thinking to like a lot of films, sometimes certain films or TV shows have certain styles of sound. Maybe it's like a lot of electric guitar rock, but there's always parts where like the symphony comes in, the orchestra comes in for like the emotional part, the strings come in. There's just these sounds that are so important for the emotional impact, where it kind of deviates from maybe what the palette is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's the fun, right? Is, figuring out what articulation in the strings or brass or whatever is going to, motivate that feeling. And that's the sound design element. Like, in most cases, it's a hybrid, right? We're going to use some sort of, synth texture to augment our organic sounds. And it can sometimes be an effect. Sometimes you just douse it in the right amount of room, the right kind of room. And other times it's more complicated, where you you have to really orchestrate this. You break it out into components and you say, look, it's the violas right here. That's where the emotional component is. So we're going to beef them up with something. Let's find the right, synth component, or double it with guitar, or, put the brass under it, or whatever. Something is going to make it speak in that way that's, going to make it better than just the thing that you intended, right? I always think of it as like something that is good and something that is just beyond superhuman. Like, how do we go extra on this? How do we push it to a point where it's now something we haven't heard before, right? Like, sound design was always that goal, right? Every movie that they started creating sound design for, whether we're talking about way back in B3 days and electro organs, where Star Trek and old soap operas, and using whatever single voice synthesizers, where like they would just get something that no one had heard before. Oh, it's weird. Like, okay, I don't know how to feel about this, right? Now we have this whole history of these sounds where we've attached feelings to them, and so we can recall those feelings instantly. All we have to do is play a theremin and we're in, spooky 60s sci-fi zone. And it's just that easy, because we know what to do with that now. Emotionally. But we're still looking for that space where, we haven't hit it yet. This is so weird. I don't know, like dubstep. I remember I was doing a Spider-Man trailer, I want to say like 15 years ago, something like that. And dubstep sound effects had just come into a thing. And they were so weird and intense, right? So, it was on the heels of Skrillex, like Sonny. He did some really cool stuff with Massive. And anyway, that became like a new paradigm where everybody wanted that sound. And so what I was doing was trying to create that sort of intensity with other instruments, guitars and organic stuff, and just running through, distortion pedals direct and amp heads with no cabinets, and just trying to find ways to, bring things forward, like so they jumped out of the speakers. And so I hit it with this one piece I was doing with my partner, who's my brother, and he's brother from another mother, but Jeff Pfeiffer is his name. And he's just like, he's the brother that I wish that I always had. And so, we would discover these things together, and, the amount of high-fiving we did back then, because we knew no one had done this yet. And like, we had a lock on these trailers, right? So every year they'd come back to us. They'd be like, okay, we want this piece of music that you did with all these sound effects, and we'd like to update it, and we'd like to do this. I'm like, sure, no problem. So we would do it. And then the next time they would say, okay, we want it like something new. We don't know what. And they would send a cattle call to like, 1,000 different people, and we'd be in the list, be like, hey, wait a minute. This is what we do, So for a while, we could head them off, I think there was like 3 years where they couldn't crack our code, right? And then eventually they did. And so it was like that for Jeff, where they would go to, Abbey Road and record all these Lecky taiko drums and things like that, and all these strange articulations, that just felt like they were just bizarre. And those were getting used as sound effects all the time. And now you go by a library and all that stuff is included in it. And so the playing field is more level, but you can still operate in that space and do something that, they haven't cracked the code on yet. Like, you can still find sound that it's just yours until it isn't, Reactor is amazing for that. I can't tell you how much mileage I've got out of Reactor. Did you ever play with that one?
I haven't played with it. No,
Oh, it's
no, not
so deep.
Reactor.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's almost too much for me, I'm like, give me one knob, all right? That's, I love
Okay.
outboard gear and I love tweaking, but, and pedals and
And
everything.
heads
But
up
it is
to people
so deep.
listening. You've
What's
got
that?
I just want people to know before we start, you've got a wild modular setup. It's not a Euro rack. It looked, maybe, was that a Moog?
Yeah, so it's
I mean, it's,
synthesizers.com. I mean, I can, show you around if you want to
well,
see.
for you to say Reactor's complicated, I just want some sort of perspective on who this is coming from and what you consider complicated. So that means
Yeah,
a
I
lot.
mean, CV is something to get used to. When you're
Mm.
working with control voltage, you really need to think differently. And I'm still, um, just plugging things in to find out what I can do with it.
Mm.
Um, but that's the fun of it, is the surprise of it. Oh, that's supposed to be audio, but I put it in CV and it sounds like something I haven't heard before. So those are the moments of surprise where, you get excited, um, and I think with Reactor, it's the same kind of thing where you can be totally surprised and in just uncharted waters instantly. But you have this ability to recall and presets and mix up all these other things. I mean, it's like, imagine this is just one color of paint, right? Now Reactor's a rainbow. Like, it's everything
Mm.
in that's possible.
That's wild.
It really is. Like, oh, I would love to have, this Prophet or this Jupiter or, yeah, you can do that. No problem. But you can have a profiter, a Jupiter,
Right.
um, and everything in between,
Mm.
everything that you can imagine. Um, it's pretty cool. Like, if it's worth getting into. I mean, just because
Yeah.
I consider it the ultimate sound design tool,
Mm.
And again, if you're using that one synth as, a component to other synths that you're saying, okay, this is the main feature here. This is like your whatever you want to turn to, right? You can make that just sound a way that you've never imagined before.
Mm.
I can't really describe it other than like, oh, here, let's play, let's make something. And then we'll both go, I don't know how this happened.
That sounds like a big part of your process. Just playing, experimenting, and you don't sound like the kind of person that's, sitting around waiting for the inspiration to strike. You're showing up, trying things out, and when it happens, and you're there for it. You're ready to grab it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how you are in all these different kinds of places where inspiration can strike. Every morning I'll show up and I'll sit down at a piano and I'll have my little recorder ready, just the memo section on the phone,
Mm.
and I'll find something that I haven't done before and I'll record it, even if it's 20 seconds. So I have about 1,000 of those. I'll go over to the guitar, dial in a tone. What does the tone want me to play? Start playing something, record it. So nuggets, starts, right? Like if it suggests something more, like, oh, I can get a melody out of this, or it feels like this kind of a subject or this kind of an emotion, like I'll make my little notes. But I read a lot. I read a lot of theoretical physics, and so a lot of ideas
Oh yeah.
for songs come from that.
Hmm.
So it'll be a topic of, it could be anything from consciousness creates the universe rather than the other way around. which is a term, biocentrism. This guy, Dr. Robert Lanza, created. And it's very interesting to just, read something you don't understand, because you're going to come away with some meaning, and that is going to translate to what you want to talk about. I mean, for me, I write mainly about how technology influences humanity and will continue to do that. But, I don't really know any science. If you ask me to explain something mathematically, sorry, I can't do that. It's science fiction to me, it's fodder for storytelling. And so I keep these ideas in my head. I'll write down little key phrases that I'll sort of paraphrase. I'll say it my way. Once I hear something that I think is sort of extraordinarily deep and too much for my little tiny brain, but I'll get some sort of meaning out of it, and then I'll carry that to an instrument and say, all right, how do we reconcile, this thing that I want to talk about and this feeling that I'm, trying to convey, and then, what does that sound like, right? What are those instruments and how does it move? And so that's a long conversation for me to have with myself. Like sometimes a song takes a year, sometimes it takes much longer, many years. But, it's just like anything, you're looking for that match that just ignites, and then you can light a forest fire from it. So sometimes I'll ignite a match and, it'll just stay a match for a year, and then I'll come back and hear it, like, I know what to do with that, and boom, I'll complete it in a couple of days. So, yeah, you never know where inspiration's going to come from. It's a conversation, it's a movie, it's a book, another record.
Right.
I mean, where do your ideas come from?
You never know. And it's a matter of almost just keeping like the antenna going and paying attention.
Right.
And I try to keep track of it when it happens. I've got like little lists that I keep, like some of it's just song titles, and that might be something like a character in a movie says, or like your friend says in a conversation, or sometimes it's like scenarios for a song could be either about or that you would want to put this song on for. I'm floating in a tube in a river. Like, okay, that's a song scenario.
Yeah,
and
safe but not safe.
The song might not be about that, but I want to hear that when I'm in the tube on the river. This would be a cool song to listen to.
Cool. Cool. I like that.
But it is a matter of just kind of always thinking about it and keeping like the door open. And what you said about the theoretical physics is kind of interesting, because sometimes it comes from stuff I don't understand, and I'll take what I think I get out of it and then sort of run with it. And sometimes even that manifests in songs with like characters. I often like to think of whoever's singing the song, it's like this character. And they might have these like misunderstandings and holes in their logic that you can kind of read if you go through it. And it's playful in that way, that you've set up this person that's kind of a little off about things, but they're constructing the world around that.
I mean, there it is right there. It's in the misunderstandings that we find our humanity. I think, we love things that aren't perfect because they remind us of our humanity. When you get digital perfection, you don't really feel anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's funny, I was just talking about this yesterday. When the DX7 came around, that was like the first digital synth that we all went, oh my God, what just happened? Like there's this new wave of technology. And there were sounds in it that were cool, but let's just say there was an element of linearity to it that didn't feel like it had any reckless abandon to it. The spirit of what we've come to love about rock music is is something dangerous, like we don't know what's going to happen when we turn this thing on. Is it going to sound like it did last time? If the knob got moved when we moved it from where it was to the gig or wherever, it's going to be different. And we're going to find our way through this. This little element of chaos is, I think, what we call mojo. We don't know how tape is going to react. We don't know if the console has, been tuned perfectly. We probably prefer that it hasn't been, that this channel's a little different than that channel. And so all of the things that make it unpredictable are the things that we appreciate most about it. And so, I don't know if I have a band called the Spiritual Machines, and I feel like the Spiritual Machines are it's more of a conversation than a band, really, because the idea that these machines are either spiritual or they're not. Like sometimes it's just, your phone, but maybe some people feel that it's a spiritual machine because it has everything in their world. Kids don't want cars anymore. They want phones, because when we want freedom, we can go anywhere we want on our phone, right? We can create a new life and we can expand our life. And I get that. But there's something about driving a car when you hit the gas and you take off, it's purely visceral, right? You get this reaction from an instrument that you're playing because you don't really know how it's going to go. I don't know how I'm going to react. I don't know how it's going to react. And now we have this element of chaos that we have to wrestle with. And I think that's the only place we find art. And it kind of died a little bit when the DX7 came in. As great a synth as it was, we didn't really know what to do with it. And I think we made it our main thing, and we gave up all the other stuff. And I remember, like before Craigslist, there was a newspaper called The Recycler, and it's where you buy and sell gear. And, Fairchilds and Pultex were free. Like they would just say, look, it's like a boat anchor to me. It's sitting on the curb. Come get it. If you paid $50, you got ripped off. Oh, you bought a Fairchild for $50? Dude, you're insane. What happened? Why didn't you get it for free? Because nobody wanted the tube gear. Nobody wanted this huge box that did one thing until they realized they couldn't make that happen with anything else. And so, I think throwing things out because there's something new and shiny and technologically better is what we're realizing, is a bad play. And I guess that's why vinyl came back, People love vinyl.
Yeah.
But why not tapes? Why not 8-tracks? Why not cassettes or reel-to-reels or, why not the Laserdisc? Like these are all media that were dumped for better mediums. I don't know. Something in record speaks to people. I know it's the art, the big album artwork.
Yeah.
There's something pretty rad about putting a needle on a record. I still love doing it.
Yeah. It's right there. It's physical. Visceral is a good word, like you said.
And then you have this thing that's a record cover that's art, and you go through your albums and you see, this is like your art collection. You see everything that means that record, right? And so you get this attachment to it. I mean, we still get it in the computer. Why is it different? Because we're not holding it? I don't know.
It's weird because, well, think about like some of the instruments I have compared to like the plugins. The plugins don't take up any space. And if you don't know where to look for them, you won't find them. I mean, if you looked around where I am right now, you'll come across the stuff that I have, whether you know what it is or not. There's a presence to it. It takes up space. It's it's
like a member of your band, right? It's like they're like little humans.
I can actually remember the first time I saw a Mini Moog, which wasn't when they came out or anything. And I was probably like 30. I'm 43 now. And it was at like just in a studio that I went to. And I was like, whoa, there it is. And it was like this piece of furniture. It was taking up space and attention. And if you want one of those in your room, it's a sacrifice of space, of, all that. And it was just very impressive to see it compared to the graphic I was used to on my computer.
Yeah.
That if it's not out, it's gone. It doesn't take anything up. There's something about it. There's something kind of weird that happened very recently. I teach high school English during the day, and we just finished up the school year. And, kids are going around.
What grade?
Ninth grade is what I've had
right on.
the last few years.
I have two that just finished ninth grade.
Oh, nice. What an age, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah. Ninth grade is like an age when you're starting to understand who you are a little bit. Yeah. I see that in a lot of them. They come in and have no idea. And sometimes by the end, they're starting to be like, oh, okay. I'm seeing myself a little for the first time.
Isn't that great, watching Awakenings?
Yeah. I mean, it's about the age when it happened for me, too, where that was when I started playing guitar. I really got into playing music. I wasn't in band or anything. And I started to say, here's something. Everything else was like a Halloween costume I was trying on, where I was trying different identities. And this was one that just sort of felt like maybe I'd finally taken the costumes off a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
But they were doing a funny thing. They're walking around with like early 2000s digital cameras taking pictures of each other.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do it too. What? They're doing that now? I was like, what are you guys doing with that thing? Like, why would you want that? You have your phone.
Right.
And they were like, oh, it's just like, it's got a look. It's got this thing and it's here. It's on this thing. And even though it's digital and it's not an actual photo, there was something to them that was cool, that it was this one device that does one thing.
Yeah.
And it does it in its own personality, which was really it's like low megapixels, and your phone is 20 times better than it. But something about that
tactile, pushing a button,
personality.
So I just have recently made the discovery of Leica cameras. So I have a friend who works for them, and he mentioned it. I don't know, maybe like a year ago. But it wasn't on my radar because I'm not a photographer. And somehow I stumbled. I'm a watch guy. I love watches. In fact, I'm making a watch. I'm starting Spiritual Machines timepieces. So just so I can design things
name.
And
the band and the watch company. That's cool.
It's fun. I mean, I gotta say, I've been so energized about it because I'll get into in a second, but the watch thing is even more interesting to me because, when the phone came along, you didn't need a watch anymore. And I thought watches would be dead. And it only made them more powerful. And everybody wanted to wear watches for the aesthetic. And now, the Apple Watch has all the faces of the classic watches that you can put on. But there is something about an automatic watch where this resurgence of industry has gone crazy. And people just love the fact that you have to wear it for it to keep time. The fact that it's really a specialized, mechanical skill that you need to work on these things. And it's a lost art, but it's gaining so much momentum, so much steam that what is it? It's an aesthetic. It's something that is an extension of you. It identifies you. It brands you. It makes you feel like, you're inseparable. It's a spiritual machine to me. As a kid, it was the one coveted thing that I never got. And so, I was able to start a collection. I inherited my great-grandfather's watch, my grandfather's watch, my dad's watch. My wife got me watches. And one day we were robbed and they were all gone. And for 20 years, I didn't wear a watch. And somehow when I made this connection where that like these things, they're necessary. I wear broken watches. I don't care that they don't tell time because I don't use them to look at the time. I look at my phone like everyone else. But I just love them. I don't know why, but I feel like that's the identity that only a watch can give. And so I've been into these little watch sites and the people that are tastemakers and stuff. And sometimes I'll notice like hashtag Leica. And then I'll look at the Leica pictures and I'll say, there's something going on there. Like they don't look like other pictures. And so my friend is telling me about like all the greatest pictures in history are taken with Leica cameras from, hundreds of years ago. The Leica glass.
Is that a brand name?
Yeah, Leica?
Okay. I never heard of it.
So they're very expensive. And in most cases, you have to be a real photographer to use them. But they have a couple models, for guys like me who know nothing. They could just point and shoot and have it look like legit. And, I've never really been on social media, but I'm starting to think maybe that's a good idea. Like, how would I do this? Like, how would I frame this up? What would it make it look like? And so there are all of these little, I think that Leica is a spiritual machine. Like if you attach to whatever it is, like some people it's Canon, some people it's Nikon. I guess you can still use Leica lenses with those cameras. There's an aesthetic there where you just go, it's not a plug-in. It's not a post-process. It's happening in real time. We're in this together, we are partners. I'm more powerful with you. I'm more alive with you. And so whether it's a car or anything else, like you just think like, we're one thing. I see myself in you, and I see the greatness that I want to be. Machines, they live longer than humans, but they still die. And so I think we see them as the best of us. We see them as what we would like to be if we could be, more perfect, closer to perfect. And so, this is a conversation that I feel like all of us have, we're just maybe framing it up differently. But I love these conversations. Like what are the spiritual machines for everybody? So I'm sure for some people it's a gun, I'm sure for some people I have a friend who's an artist. He's, he draws like photorealism and he uses a mechanical pencil. And without that mechanical pencil, he can't do what he does. And so, this $30 pencil is his spiritual machine, for lack of another term for it,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because maybe even like I might pick up that pencil and it's cool. Maybe it's heavy or something, but I won't really see the difference between my like number two,
Okay, but now imagine this, right? You have somebody come over and play your keyboard and they play something you've never played before and they dial in a sound you've never actually dialed in before. And you now feel like you're better. You didn't do anything. You witnessed your world grow. And now you're going to think differently. Now you're going to approach that differently. And I feel like that's what happens is we want to expand. We want to build on what we have. And some things allow for that. And those are the things that we hold dear. I can't live without this piece of gear. I have this compressor. I always use it. I have, this pedal, this piece, right? And like no production would be complete if I didn't at least go through the motions with that thing.
Yeah, it's a very deliberate act. I think maybe that's what it was with the camera too, with the students of mine. I mean, they have their phone, they can do a million things on it, and they can snap pictures real quick, couple thumb movements, and they've got it. But to take out that camera, This is a deliberate thing, and we're going to do this with more intention than maybe we normally do.
And maybe it does look different and they like that because it looks different. I mean, Polaroid had a huge comeback and, you know, my kids were all about them. And
well,
when
they said
it's
it's like a
photo,
filter. They said it's kind of, it's like got its own filter. And
it has.
I think what they're referring to is that just that the way that machine does what it does. It's got its own way.
Well, it makes you think, be more selective, right? You know, when you're spending $1 a photo, you're not going to shoot wildly the way you do with a phone.
Right.
Or with
even a
SIM
memory card.
Yeah. You're going to be more economical about how you think. You're going to compose your shots a little bit more. You know, you're going to be more selective about what a worthy photograph is. And I don't know. I mean, I guess like all of it matters. These cycles of how we think and, you know, coming from never taking notes to now always saving presets. I can tell you that I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have that era where I didn't take notes, where I relied on chaos to sort of, you know, be my partner. And now I can sort of, you know, recall what measures I have to take to throw myself into uncharted waters if I feel like something's safe, if I feel like, you know, I'm just doing the motions, you know, the nuts and bolts, the process. I need some danger in this. How do I mess myself up? And so, yeah, these are artistic tools, right? And I never went to art school, but I envy people who did because they already know this stuff. They learned it. Oh, I can reverse it. I can flip it upside down. I can use negative space. I can, you know, whatever the principles are that guide all artists, to have them laid out for you in class is kind of amazing. Like, I wish I had that. Learned everything by failing.
Yeah. It's a safe way to learn too. But some of this stuff too really does take a long time to settle in. You know, I don't know if you get it in a semester. You kind of have to really spend some time with it and go through it a bunch. Then you start to realize.
Do you use that expression, that word myelinate?
To just kind of almost like congeal.
Yeah. Do you use that word myelinate?
Not on a day-to-day basis, no.
Yeah. I mean, I love it because it just, you know, it makes clear what we go through, right? We're learning when we're not trying to learn. Like when we're sleeping, it's still, you know, the myelin in our brains is still processing what we're learning. And it can happen for years. And, you know, that's why they say don't practice more than X amount of hours a day, whatever it is. Because you're really not learning anything past a point. The only way you do learn is by going for a run or whatever else you would do where your brain would still think about that and process it, and your hands actually learn dexterity and fluidity when they're not doing the task. It's part of learning, right? You have in the trench learning, and then you have, you know, the everything else time where it sinks in.
I read an article recently about that kind of thing with, I think it was piano players or some kind of musician, where they had them practice for, you know, straight long breaks of time. And then they had another group practice for like a minute or two and take a little break. And then a minute or two, take a break. Like always take a couple minutes off every few minutes. And those people moved along faster than the people that were just, because I guess after a while, you're just doing it so much that you're almost not processing. And you're not giving yourself a chance to kind of reflect on it and step back and soak in.
I mean, obviously the goal is to make it automatic, right? To not think about it. Your body just knows what to do, muscle memory. And yeah, there has to be a technical, you know, sort of format for efficiency, right? Like this is what you do if you want to have maximum. And I'm sure everybody's different, but there's a guy that I know really well who is one of those. He's a machine. This guy will learn how to play an instrument really, really well, like in months. It'd be like, I'm just learning how to play guitar. Doot, 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 doot. And he'll come back months later and he's shredding. And it'll be anything from piano to wind instruments and brass. Like, it's just nuts, this guy. And now he's having a problem with carpal tunnel. He's a young guy. But he loves music and he immerses himself entirely. He like never has a minute of the day that he's not listening to something, analyzing something, practicing something, writing something. And in my mind, that's the goal. Like he's the example that we should all follow. But I think that there's danger in that example. Like, burnout for one, frustration, that muscle damage, that tendon damage. And then there's something else, like, we love this. It brings us joy. When we put on a record and we go, oh my, it's magic. How did they do this? Right? Or you get to a point where you go, how did this happen? This is magic. It's so far beyond me to just do what happened. I don't know how it happened. It was a gift from God. Whatever it is, however you want to, describe it, it's just, what a lucky moment we're in right here. Let's savor it, right? And so that was the reason we got into it, because we're living from that moment to the next one. And if you're really just doing the work, then you're missing out on some of those moments. And to me, the goal is to have as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be just to have a stack of records in the corner that I got to be a part of. That's the legacy, right? When we're dead, that will be the thing that we did with our life. It's a snapshot in time, right? It's a photo album, but it's record albums. This is where I was at this moment, right? This is the photo album of your life told in terms of records. But now I realize, no, it's really just about that feeling. That's the drug that we get addicted to.
There's nothing quite like that feeling when you can listen back to it. Maybe like you with your band, right? I'm sure you guys finish some music and you ever sit down and listen to it together and just feel like, wow, we made that out of nothing. It didn't exist. And here it is. I don't think, I love the act of it, but I also love the sitting back and enjoying it part too. Just
the celebration. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I would go down to a studio in LA called Paramount, where they had a room, an overdub room for $25 an hour. And the guys who owned the place were really cool. They just said, look, we have this great gear locker, got Neumanns, everything else you could imagine in there. You're welcome to just take what you want and go record from midnight to 8 a.m. And so I'd save my paper route money. I was a little kid. I'd get a ride down to the studio, and I'd borrow gear from friends. Like, hey man, you got a cool amp. Can I borrow that tonight? I'll bring it back in the morning. And whatever it was, like I would go and set up 20 mics. I'd listen to everything, EQ everything, and check the phase on everything, and like mic the back and get everything I could going, because it was a race against time, right? And I would write something, I'd record it, I'd learn how to engineer as best as I could, and then I'd make a cassette, and 8 a.m. would roll along, and I'd get a ride home, and I would listen in the car to that cassette. And if that's not magic, I don't know what is, because while the world was asleep, I made something.
Hmm.
And I knew, like, this is the only thing that I really care about. I want to make something. And I felt so lucky to be able to do that. I felt like, I'd been given a lot of opportunities, and I wasn't going to take it for granted. I was going to use every second of it, But yeah, I mean, it's just turning over stones, man. There's a lot of them out there. Let's see what's underneath.
Yeah, that's true. There's no end to it.
No.
You just
and
keep
there's no
turning.
end to great ideas, right? And so you might think you got a lock on it, and maybe you do for that idea. But if somebody comes to you and says, yeah, we do it this way, which is maybe total opposite of your idea, we've got this now. Now you go, oh God, I want to do that too, right? And I want to do the other. It never gets old. I mean, especially working with film, right? You might have a million ways to score a scene, and they're all going to be diametrically opposed and amazing. So there's no right answer to the question. It's just a creative, approach and difference that sets it apart. And so, that you could ever get over it, that you could ever say, yeah, I've done enough of that. It's impossible. You'll see something, where I did it with an orchestra. Now this person's using cartoon sounds and it's better. Like, it's just something about it, appeals. Like, you might score what's on screen and someone else scored what's not on screen, and then brand new. Like, it's
what do you mean by that? Off screen, not on screen and on screen?
Like so sound is different than picture, because picture, you can only see what you can see when you can see it. Right. But with sound, you can pre-lap, right? You can you can telegraph something, right? Before it happens. Or something, you know what I mean? Like, anything can be telegraphed, danger or excitement or whatever. Love, right? If you just play something beautiful, that could be your love theme. Nobody knows it until they fall in love. Now you recall it later. And you've told the audience, when you recall it after they've broken up, that they're going to get back together if you play that love theme. So you can score that moment, that idea, that feeling at a moment where someone else is scoring what's happening on screen. You're like, no, I'm setting up the next scene already. And there's something that you're recalling, there's something that you're suggesting, right? Or, for instance, you're in the love scene and he's going to leave her for somebody else, or she's going to leave, him, or whatever it is. Like, you're playing that also. Like, there's a love theme, but there's also something amiss about it. Like, there's something that you're suggesting. There's more than what's going on right here.
Right.
And so in many cases, like, you're just heightening the emotion that's on screen. And in other cases, you're storytelling. Like, you're saying, here's the whole picture. And if you really pay attention, you'll realize I was giving it away the whole time. But maybe on the third or fourth.
You hear a little dissonance in that happy love theme, and you kind of know something's coming.
Yeah. Or, I mean, let's just say you fade to black and something trails off, right? What trails off is what you're going to think about. It could just be the ring out of the chord or an echo trail or whatever, but it can also be movement. It can also be sound design. It can be whatever you want to leave them with, optimism, defeat. There's an opportunity that sound has that picture doesn't. I mean, sound came first. And God said, let there be light. The sound of his voice came before the light. So, I mean, it just depends on how how you frame things that makes it a thing. It's hard to describe really, but you just have leeway. I mean, there are colors that will trigger emotions. There are sounds that trigger emotions. But you don't really know what an emotion is until it's realized. And so to suggest it, to tease it, is kind of, you're like the puppet master, You're controlling your audience on strings, You don't even know why your arms are going like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the magic when you're really absorbed.
Yeah.
All of these things are happening to you. And I guess I'm sure from your perspective, when you're setting it up, you're kind of like, you know exactly what's going on, but we just fall into that.
I mean, you always start
trance.
out conventional ways. You'll have a conversation, and that the director for a movie or the showrunner for a TV show will tell you what they're thinking, and usually that's the job, right? Is to help them realize their vision of things. But if you want to introduce a new idea as an option or open their eyes to something that they might not have seen, or just if you think they're wrong, like give them what you think is right, if there's time to do that, then yeah, you might get into your head before you even begin what you want to do. But I think so much of it is just an instant reaction. Like you just, pull something up, and when you find a good match, you go. So yeah, usually it's after the fact that I go, oh, what would be wild is hearing what I've done if I did it again like this, and so you get iterations going.
Right.
But that's the real fun, right? Is because I don't even get creative until I think I've been creative,
Okay. So you kind of have something there that you can then play with. That's so
react
true.
To, right? To react to.
It's like you can't think this stuff up in songwriting. Like you don't just like think it up. You have to get your hands dirty. And then once you do that, something else happens. And then that causes another chain reaction.
That's it, right? I mean, it's electricity. You feel like you're just pulled to it. It's magnetism. It's something where I don't know that there's even like a thought process as much as it is just like this sort of trigger in us where we've become machines and we just go. I have this theory about kids, raising kids, is you don't really have to do a lot of work if you just put them where they belong. Put everything where it goes. Put this kid on the right track and it'll know what to do. Like, oh, you like to analyze things. Okay, you belong over here in science or math. Like, oh, you like to ponder things. Okay, you're more of a philosopher, aren't you? Like, let's get you in humanities and English and reading. And I mean, you're a dancer. Like my kids are dancers. And, the other one's an entrepreneur. And like, all I need to do is say, I wonder what a good idea to make money would be. Like he'll come up with ideas. And like, I have no doubt he's going to be successful. And I have no doubt that one of my daughters is going to make stuff and the other is going to be about excellence, like technical proficiency. And their personalities are written. Like all you need to do is just say, these are your people. This is your group. Like when they got into dance, they learned how to model, the high school seniors when they were in kindergarten. And they're good people, those seniors. They take the kindergartners under their wings and, they treat them like humans and they embrace them. And, like I said, my twins were in 9th grade this year. I mean, the seniors are driving them around and saying, hey, you want to go to In-N-Out and we'll get a burger? Like, did that happen for you? That wasn't a thing for me. Like,
No,
you ended
no.
up in a dumpster if you were a freshman.
Yeah, right. That's a cool
So
advantage.
yeah, there's a world where, like, if you find the right senior,
But they're in the right, they got their crowd
that's
they
it.
connect with.
You put
Yeah.
them in the right lane and they just go off to the races. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to just, finding that lane.
Mm.
That's the hard part.
Right.
And it really
Yeah,
isn't
for all
that
of us.
hard.
Yeah.
There's just a certain amount of personality profiles, right? Everybody
Right.
fits into some lane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of have to just pay attention to where things kind of fit together for you.
Yeah, it's your context, right? Like, so some kid likes to cook. Well, you're going to learn math by cooking. Oh, you like engines. All right, well, let's learn math that way.
Mm-hmm.
Cubic inches. Let's talk about that for a minute. So whatever it is, like, I know there's a way to put everybody where they belong. You just have to have the resources.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great if school was a little more focused on figuring that out instead of just
Cracking the code on the
putting them,
individual.
jamming all the square pegs into the triangle pegs and the, just trying to make it all work for everybody.
Yeah. Utopia. We'll get there.
Yeah, right. So you got some new music coming out with the band, right?
Yeah.
The Spiritual Machines.
Yeah, Spiritual Machines. Just
Got
finished
to
a
hear
record.
That's got to be satisfying and exciting for you guys, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've known these guys forever, and I haven't really played music with humans in decades, and this is really what made me want to play again with humans. I mean, I'm so used to staying in a room like this and doing what I do alone. But, I love these guys, and they're all creative powerhouses. And so this record was really sort of, even though it's the third full record, it's sort of a new direction, and it's a new concept where I want it to be a band where, we're all doing what we talked about. Everybody's generating ideas, we're all producing, we're all, grabbing microphones and engineering. But we're also jamming and sort of, organically finding material. And so, I want to build this, and that's what, getting all this hybrid type of gear is about, is trying to have the record appear in our in-ear monitors as close to the record as we can make it sound. And so I don't want to play to tracks. I want it to be just us. But, there's always that frustration of being at a venue and, what's it going to sound like? Are we going to be able to overcome, the sound guy, the horrible sound system, the weird room, et cetera, et cetera. And so it takes
chaos.
The power back.
Yeah.
So,
that's fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's kind of a great time to be alive with all the tools that we've got.
There's no better time to be making music. I mean, just all of the possibilities. And that sounds like a fun way to approach it. It reminds me of myself and my current band, actually, too, because I grew up playing in bands and then got more into production, and then even like live performance as a solo hybrid electronic kind of thing. And playing with people again, it's like, if we're going to play together, we might as well collaborate, right? Because we can do it all by ourselves,
Right.
And I've had the chance, maybe when I was younger, and, you'd write a song. I know how the drums need to go. I know what I want the bass to do. And you're like the dictator. But now I've got to be, the only voice in the song for so long, working alone, that when I get together with people, it's like, I really want that. I want you to come up with this. I might have ideas for what I would think the part should do, but it's so much more fun now to let it be whatever it's going to be. And I think
So
on the whole, it comes out better, or at least more interesting and exciting.
yeah, less homogenized, right?
Yeah, like I wouldn't have thought to play that on the bass or.
So the thing that I want to do with this band is once we have a song and we have a treatment, like we've been jamming it out and everybody's happy, I want us all to start over in our own studios. And I want us to build out our own productions. And I don't want anybody to hear anybody else's until we're all done.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to all sit together and just say, oh my God, like what you did here and what you did there and what you did, like we make this, sort of hybrid amalgamation of things. And then we redo everything according to that. Best foot forward from all sides,
That's cool.
I just feel like there's no other complete way to do it. You might get the record the way that you're happy and it might be cool, but let's just say you can make it 10% better. I mean, we work in this lane all the time. We spend 95% of our money on the last 3% of the sound. We do it with everything. I mean, yeah, it's diminishing returns, but it's still worth it. Because better is better. If we can make it better, then yeah, man, I want to. I'll work another year on it. Like, I don't care. That's what we do. Like, this is the pet project, right? It's not a job. And so for the pet project, there's no rules, there's no timeline, and there's no limitations. And so, I mean, you'll never get to perfect and you'll never get to good enough and you'll never get to a place where you feel like, you hit a home run. It's always going to be unfinished. It's always going to feel like, I couldn't really solve the equation entirely. But that's what experimenting is, It's just, we're going to fail. But we're going to fail fun, We're going to have a lot of high fives in that failure.
Well, that failure brings a lot of energy to the next project too.
Yeah. We're going to fail uphill.
Yeah, that's when things get finished. It makes me excited for the next thing. So, well, that was cool, but let's do something else. Let's try this. Let's see what happens when this goes that way instead of the way we did it. And that can be enough to keep the projects going, to keep the next thing fresh.
Well, there it
and
is,
exciting.
right? The word is project. Like, we're not making an album here. We're making a project, and it never ends until we say it's over. And so, yeah, like it might be a song, it might be an album, it might be a volume, and it might be a lifetime career. But hopefully you get the opportunity to just keep going and keep growing. I mean, I feel like that's the difference between the era now and the way it used to be. You had 6 weeks. The label gave you a budget. You made a record. 6 weeks. Then it was 3 weeks. And then if nothing happened or not enough happened to justify the next step, then it was over. You needed permission from the guy with the gavel. Bonk, you get to make a record.
Yeah.
Now, you just make that record. I mean, the stuff my kids play me, it's all over the place. It's literally, I can't even get my head around it. My son will listen to Pavement and Radiohead and Kendrick Lamar and, J. Cole and the Dreamville guys. And then he'll listen to guys like Anderson .Paak and, it's just, who's this other guy he loves? Like, there's so much stuff that I don't even know. Like, what is your taste? Like, what do you stand for? Well, I stand for stuff that's cool. That's good enough. It used to be if you stood for something, you stood against something too.
Yeah.
And so there's a new world where like there's no like musical prejudice. When they sit down and listen to something, it's with open ears. and they'll tell you what they like about it, and they'll react viscerally, and they'll let it wash over themselves in a wave, and they'll feel it, or they won't, and they'll tell you, you know, feels contrived, feels like a construct, it feels whatever. To me, like, I wish I could have grown up like that. You know, back then it was like, you know, we thought of rock as this kind of music that was off the rails, and it was, you know, something that you loved because it had teeth and your parents hated it, and, you know, it made sense to us that this was our music. And then it became a caricature of itself, right? Where it was all made on grids and Pro Tools using samples and the same tones, the same mixers, the same, you know, cookie cutter footprint of everything. And it became more pop than pop. And I'll never forget, I don't know if you're too young for this, but the song Hella Good from No Doubt came out, and it was their dance song. And I just thought, this might be the most punk rock thing I've heard all decade, because this rock band was doing a dance song, and it had guts. Like, it was bold, and it was cool. And I just thought, well, this is the new punk rock, is the thing that you don't expect, right? The thing that is probably the least cool idea that you can do.
Yeah.
And so now, like, you don't have to act for or against anything. The kids just, they feel something or they don't. And that's cool, man. Like, I really wish it could have been like that, you know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff, a lot of the rock, the punk especially, it was, I think looking back, it wasn't so much about the sound. It was the chance you were taking, because like something like punk rock should have never been able to be commercialized and packaged up into this formula. It's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. It became more corporate than anything else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like, how is this now so polished and predictable? But it was more about just going in a direction that was a little dangerous, a little off the beaten path. And
it had a sound. I mean, for better or worse, like, you know, that corporate era of punk rock, like, it had a sound. And if that is something that appeals to you, then that's great. But I think that, you know, what really is cool is that all of the surrounding circumstances sort of don't matter anymore. You know? It's so funny. We were listening to Radiohead, The Bends, which is one of my all-time faves.
Yeah.
And my son was commenting on how, you know, he liked the guitar. I was like, oh, you know what's funny is this guitar actually kind of sounds like it might have been inspired by Fly By Night by Rush. And you'll probably laugh when you hear that, but let me play it for you. And he said, you want to know something? I think I like this even more. I was like, really? You like Rush? Okay, well, let's go down this rabbit hole for a while. So we played a dozen Rush songs, and he's like, I love this band. I love what they're doing. I love what they sound like. I love how it feels, and, you know, on and on. And I was like, how do you love Rush? Like, you've never even listened to prog rock. Like, but there's something about it where it triggered him. I was like, what else do you need to say? I'm glad you love it. Like, finding something you love is the goal. Doesn't matter what it is. And, but it never would have dawned on me. Never would have expected it. I mean, he listened to nothing but rap for years. And then he's listening to indie rock. And, you know, stuff that's really weird and wild and fun. But yeah, like, how does that happen? Where something just feels like there's no way, it's disparate, it's not going to fit into the equation. And then it fits perfectly. You think you know something, you know? You think you understand how things work. You don't know anything. Because you have these conventional set of, you know, tools that you use to understand the universe. And then you just go, okay, I have no tools anymore. Like, let's start over. Help me see what you see. That's the rebirth, letting go.
Right. Well, that's not taking notes or making presets, right? That's just part of that.
Yeah, it is. The chaos of it. It's your friend. It's your partner.
Yeah, that's a lot of magic comes out of that. That's when you have to solve problems. That's when you have to make decisions. It
used to be the weirder idea, the better, right? Like I would just say, all right, so here's what we're doing. The living room is an L shape. We're going to record the drums over in the small part, the L, and we're going to put a mic up in the chimney over here around the bend. We're going to walk up the stairs, walk around the corner, go into the bathroom, put a mic in the tub, but we're going to run a tube from the kick drum all the way up into the bathtub, right? And it's going to be right here, but we're going to use the curvature where your back goes, and we're going to put the tube at the top. It's going to go down here. It's going to collect, and then over here, pointed down, is going to be the microphone. We're going to hear that tube, and it's going to be in the mix at 3%. We're going to pitch down an octave and, run a distortion pedal on it, whatever you're going to do. But like all of these ideas, just for no reason other than curiosity, those were what drove everything. Just like, what else can we do? Yeah. What else can we do? The fridge. What does the fridge sound like? Leave it open. Put a mic in it.
What happens if? Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens if?
Exactly.
I love that part of it, actually. It's one of my favorite parts is that what if? Let's see.
Yeah.
The exploration, almost like you're in the 1400s getting in that boat and just let's see what's out there.
There's a new world in that tube. Let's move the tube to the bridge. That's it.
That's awesome, man.
That's it. Yeah.
So we want to send people to your work, thespiritualmachines.com. That should be easy enough to find.
Thank you.
Where do you like? Where else do you like to send people? Any projects or even TV shows or things you want people to check out, knowing that you worked on them?
Yeah. I use these bands to tell stories, and everything is a subject, and it's just sort of a platform to tell that story through and through. So I have other bands. One is called Less Friction. One is called The Highest of Lows. And there's several others, but these projects, they just are an opportunity to have an outlet for whatever the topic is. So I chip away at them, every few years I'll make a record. Every few years I'll call the peeps and say, all right, we're doing it. Let's do it. And so it's really, the kind of thing that I'll always do and look forward to doing. But I'm making a graphic novel for Less Friction, which is about sort of interdimensional traveling. I don't even want to open the can of worms about what it's about because it's too big. It'll just take up too much time. But that's a project that's very near and dear. And I do that with my friend Jeff Pfeiffer, who I told you about, and then my friend Paint, who is also on the Spiritual Machine stuff this record. So I'm sort of joining worlds a little bit. But, in terms of shows, I was up for an Emmy this year for a show called Wildlife Kingdom, which is the oldest running animal show in history. Really cool. It was on before I was born, and they brought it back, and I've been scoring that for a year with my friends, and we're having a great time on it. And So I recommend that, and I recommend the Harlem Globetrotters, Pay It Forward, and the Globetrotters are awesome. Greg Robinson from The Office is hosting the show, and he's amazing. One of the funniest guys alive. His band's incredible. I don't know if you know his band.
What character was he?
He was Daryl. Daryl from The Office.
Daryl, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. So he's super talented and
cool.
super funny. And the show's great. It's basically them doing good deeds all over the place, just showing up and getting stuff done. But, so between those shows, I mean, there's a lot of shows that I do that are just real feel-good shows, things that, I'm sort of proud to share with my kids. And, I did a lot of stuff that was very, very dark. And after a lot of that, it just feels good knowing, we're not murdering people in this episode. That's great.
Right.
So I really enjoy it. And there's a lot of, just wide shot landscapes, opportunity to go big with music. And that's cool. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to. The record comes out August 16th for the Spiritual Machines. It's called Lock-Hearted. And it's essentially like an 80s oriented, or inspired record. There's a lot of synthwave and things that, truly amazing music today. But this is probably more rooted in the nature of songwriting from the 80s than the sound of 80s records. I mean, there are things where you go, oh yeah, no, I know that sound. But it's, I feel like there was an era of songwriting back then that, that's my era. And so it's under my skin. And so I relate to it. And that's kind of where I pushed this record to be. It's the subject is basically about being a love letter to my family. Like if I was going to die today, like these are the conversations I want to have. These are the things I don't want to leave unsaid. And so it's very personal. And it's definitely one of those records where, I wish I could have made it as a kid, And so that's the mission now, is to reconnect with why I love music and why I got into it, And so there's a lot of that search in this record. There's a lot of muted parts where I spent months and just, nope, that's not it. So it was a lot of fun doing it, getting to stay in that lane for years, really. I guess cool. It's just an indulgence. Yeah. It's an indulgence, to be able to work with those sounds and feel connected to the era and, design sounds that sort of, complement it and feel like, oh, we can evolve this palette, We can turn it into something that maybe people haven't heard before.
It's a great palette, and sometimes it's, it's brought back to like really trigger the time period and, but there's a lot of depth and a lot more that can be done with it. So,
yeah.
I tell you what, in the songs I heard, that didn't strike me that it was really? Like an 80s type of, because it sounds pretty modern. It has a lot of that other stuff like in a rock band would have. That wasn't what jumped out at me. So that's cool to hear. I might not hear all the synth work, and there's a lot of that in there, but
you do hear it. Okay,
it's I guess like what I'm saying is not like the gimmick of like, oh, we're going like retro with this, and
okay,
that's not how it comes across, which is cool.
Well, thank you. It's one of those things where you do it because you want to do it. You don't expect anybody to connect with it, and you hope that they do. But in the end, you're going to do it anyway. So I guess I have no idea what the read will be, I sort of assumed that people that liked the epic stuff will think this is not for them. But maybe there's, a chance they will like it and somebody new might like it. And so, we'll see.
Well, that's not your job, right?
I appreciate you listening. Sorry?
That's not your job. Your job is to make it.
Yeah. I mean, you just can't control anything beyond that, right?
Right.
So why try?
Right.
But it is, I don't know. It's like a sustainable engine, right? It just gets you right back to work, and you're just going to keep going no matter what. So I appreciate you having a listen. Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And talking to you, I really pick up on your passion and your desire to find new things and keep staying inspired. It's inspiring, funny enough. That's
well,
like,
thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, likewise. I think the fact that you're doing this is because you're hungry and curious, and I think that's what Bob Dylan was saying. He who is not busy being born is busy dying.
Yeah, this has been a great way to stay inspired and learn and just expand the options in a way. So thanks for being part of that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
been a lot
pleasure.
of fun. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll keep in touch. Let me know if anything ever comes up again, and we can always do another.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I'm going to start my own podcast about the spiritual machine. So you're going to be my guest.
Yeah, you should. Seriously, this has been one of the biggest learning experiences of my life, just doing these conversations. I'll bet. Crazy.
I'll bet. Yeah. I for me, it's just that element of curiosity. Like, you have no idea what people are going to find important, what they're afraid of, what they're inspired by. And, you kind of just have to let them go, let them talk. So, there's no other way to get there.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what it all is. It's a conversation. We're making a record, and then people react to it. And then that, should influence what you do on the next record. Don't do that again.
Yeah. Well, so much of the record itself, it's a conversation between members, instruments, melodies, all that stuff. So
yeah,
it's no wonder
counter melodies.
People like Socrates had his Socratic circle. It's just talk.
That's a good method. So, yeah. We should stick with it.
Yeah, I think so.
He was good at method, that guy.
Yep.
He had a lock on it.
So listen, I'll put all this stuff in the show notes. Thank you again, and thank you to everyone listening.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you want to help support the show, the best thing you can do is tell a friend, someone you think that would enjoy the show. I'd also love it if you could leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support my work, you can go to brianfunk.com. I've got tons of Ableton Live packs, tutorials, samples. You can check out my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, which gives you 365 short music-making activities to help you get started, stay inspired, and finish more music. And there's also the Music Production Club, where you get my latest releases as soon as they're finished. It gives you access to a community of like-minded people who are making music and sharing ideas. You can share your music, find new collaborators, and participate in our live meetings where we set up some kind of musical challenge and then make music together and share our results at the end. That's the Music Production Club. It's a lot of fun, and you can find that and everything that I do at brianfunk.com. Thanks again for listening to the show, and have a great day.